Okay, we're continuing with the book review of The Cancer Resolution by Mark Lintern. We're going to be covering pages about 257 to 344 today. He says lactic acid is produced in abundance by tumors because they're relying on glycolysis primarily. And this creates an acidic environment in the surrounding tissue because the cell, you produce the end product of glycolysis is lactic acid or lactate plus a proton. So it has to pump that out right away, otherwise it would become too acidic within the cytoplasm. So it pumps it out in the extracellular space, and this acidifies the extracellular space, which has bad effects upon it. It sort of increases the aggressiveness of fungal infections, and the lactic acid being pumped out into the extracellular space suppresses the immune system, so it's double bad. This helps explain why chronic inflammation can lead to cancer. Iron overload also is double bad. It's actually triple bad. It increases the aggressiveness of fungal pathogens, infections, which appear to be taking over the cell. It suppresses the immune system, and it can also cause, Fenton reaction and secondary destructive reactions. Okay, it can cause amyloid clotting, more hypoxia. Okay, but also once you see when you go through this metabolic mechanisms of cancer, there is something good that comes out of doing this. You recognize there's things you could do. If iron overload makes cancer worse, then you can minimize your intake of dietary iron, and you can do a phlebotomy, get your serum ferritin down to like about 30 to 80. That could help you. That's what I would do. You don't want diabetes. What causes diabetes? Primarily eating a high-fat diet. You don't want mitochondrial inhibitors. You would like your mitochondria to start functioning normally again. Okay, let's see what else. You don't want tissue hypoxia, so anything that's atherogenic is going to cause more hypoxia, so you don't want that. Anything that causes leaky gut, iron overload are going to cause more amyloid clotting in your blood, so you don't want that. It means you want to eat more dietary fiber. You want to filter your water, reverse osmosis, get the aluminum, get the fluoride out, get the chlorine out. They can all contribute to causing leaky gut. Eat organic only, so you avoid glyphosate, which can also contribute to causing leaky gut. So it just totally makes sense. Avoid the processed food. The emulsifiers can contribute to causing leaky gut. So that it tells you what to do. That's what's so beautiful about this. This is not just a futile exercise and saying, oh, isn't it sad? Look at all this bad stuff. No, you can say, well, look, I can fix this problem. 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 These are fixable things. Many tumors are methionine dependent. Cancer cells cannot create their own methionine. They're forced to rely on dietary sources. And he points it out in his own words. He says, dependence on methionine is a weakness of the cancer. You can minimize your intake of protein. Ruth Hydrates, PhD, the lady who survived metastatic breast cancer for over 35 years. She's had her 90th birthday recently. She stopped eating beans. She's 100% vegan, but she stopped eating beans just because she wanted to minimize her intake of protein. And I know T. Colin Campbell says, oh, it's animal protein that causes cancer growth, not so much with plant protein, but I think his study was pretty limited. He only gave a mono source of protein, like a mono source of gluten, a mono source of soy, 20% of calories overall. But in real life, people mix their proteins, and you could, all plant foods also have all the amino acids. They just have a relatively less percentage of methionine. So by suppressing your overall protein intake, you could potentially suppress the cancer growth in that way. Logically, that's what it seems. And we really don't need much protein. We really only need, maybe about 4% calories from protein. The Golden study, patients did very well, fed only 2.5% of calories from protein. So, because a lot of people are going around saying, oh, you need, more like in the ballpark of 6%, 7% of calories from protein. But human breast milk is only 5 to 6% of calories from protein. And that's during the most rapid phase of growth in life. So it makes sense that you would never need more than that, ever. Okay? So, Kempner got his patients down to about 4% of calories from protein. And so, that's pretty easy to do. Fruit is very low in protein. Eat a lot of fruit. Ruth Hydrates loves to eat fruit. She initially started with the McDougall diet, a vegan starch-based diet. She later moved towards a raw vegan diet. So fruits are very low in protein. They're high in vitamin C. Okay, that all sounds good. Okay, let's see what next. Fungal cells. Some tumors are estrogen dependent, so you want to avoid all those exogenous estrogens. I would avoid soy and flax, all that stuff. Soy is, most of the literature on soy that says it's good is all corporate funded, and my impression of it, I think it sounds to me like a toxin. I'd stay away from it. Some tumors are estrogen dependent, like breast cancer. Candida albicans is stimulated to become more aggressive and grow in the presence of estrogen. All this fungal stuff is relevant because he thinks fungi are what's causing the cancer to be persistent. Fungal infection can cause a previously normal cell to switch to glycolysis instead of mitochondrial energy production from glucose. This is called the Warburg effect. So the important point is it's not just hypoxia that induces a Warburg effect. Professor Michael Assanti showed that ketones can stimulate tumor growth, and this contradicts the claim made by Professor Seyfried, who says that cancer cells cannot use ketones due to defective mitochondria. Okay, I got the page numbers for all this stuff in here. Mitochondria in cancer are sometimes not necessarily dysfunctional. Yeah, the mitochondria might still be working, some of them, more than one would think. It might be that the cell just wants to go with glycolysis, not that it has to in some cases. Glutamine-driven oxidative phosphorylation is a major means of ATP production in some cancer cells. Dietary restriction of glucose is limited by the liver converting glutamine amino acid to glucose. So you can't win the game just by restricting glucose, because the liver is going to make glucose to supply the brain, and it's going to convert protein and glutamine into glucose. So you're not going to get around that by just trying to restrict glucose. I like the idea of minimizing dietary fat, so you minimize insulin resistance and you minimize hyperglycemia. I haven't studied it, but perhaps there's a benefit to, time-restricted eating, because you're just limiting the availability of glucose in the blood. You do that simultaneously with limiting the availability of fat, limiting the availability of iron, limiting the availability of estrogen. You might have a winning formula. Things that promote cancer include hyperglycemia, like diabetes, insulin resistance, glutamine, the protein amino acid, iron overload, excessive dietary fat, lactate, estrogen and hormone-sensitive cancers, methionine, the amino acid. Obesity has more fat, and the fat makes estrogen, so it's not good to be fat. Note, you can dietarily restrict iron, protein, especially methionine. Avoid foods that are high in methionine. You can restrict fat. You can restrict sodium chloride. I didn't really get into sodium chloride here today, but sodium chloride does a couple of bad things. It can suppress immune cell function. It can make platelets hyperactivated, and it can also cause the chloride to displace bicarbonate in the blood, which is a pH buffer. Thereby, when you decrease your pH buffer of the bicarbonate being displaced by the chloride, they're both anions, that will lead to a low-grade metabolic acidosis. Low-grade metabolic acidosis, favors a tumor microenvironment, tumor milieu that's acidotic, which helps to suppress the immune system. It's bad. Okay, so you don't want excessive dietary salt. Anyways, I hope you found that helpful.